Springfield, Missouri, October 2002. The autumn wind swept through the quiet streets of Springfield with a biting chill that seemed to seep into every corner of the small Missouri town. Leaves tumbled across cracked sidewalks, gathering in doorways and against chain-link fences. The sky hung low and gray, promising rain that never quite came. It was the kind of weather that made people hurry home, lock their doors, and stay inside. On the afternoon of October 12, 2002, 14-year-old Emily Carter walked down Elm Street with her backpack slung over one shoulder, her breath forming small clouds in the cold air. She was a slight girl with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing a faded denim jacket over her school uniform. Her brown eyes scanned the street ahead, looking for the familiar shape of her father's blue sedan. Emily lived with her mother, Linda Carter, in a modest two-bedroom house on the east side of town. Her parents had divorced 3 years earlier, a messy split that had left both parties bitter and Emily caught in the middle. James Carter, her father, had moved to a small rental property on the outskirts of Springfield, where he continued working as a mechanic at Donnelly's Auto Repair on Highway 65. The divorce had changed James. Friends and neighbors noticed it immediately. The man who had once been friendly, if somewhat quiet, became increasingly withdrawn. He stopped attending church, stopped showing up at community gatherings, and spent most of his free time alone at his property. His co-workers at the auto shop said he'd become obsessed with privacy, often muttering about keeping things safe and protecting what matters. Linda had grown concerned about James's state of mind, but the custody agreement was clear. Emily would visit her father every other weekend. Despite her misgivings, Linda couldn't deny James his parental rights without concrete evidence of danger. That October afternoon, Emily was supposed to meet her father at the corner of Elm and 3rd Street at 3:30. It was a routine they'd established. James would pick her up after school and they'd spend the weekend at his place. Emily had seemed reluctant that morning when Linda dropped her off at Springfield Middle School. "Do I have to go, Mom?" she'd asked, her voice small. Linda had sighed, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "It's just 2 days, sweetheart. Your father loves you, he's going through something right now. He's weird now," Emily had said bluntly. "Last time he kept talking about building something to keep me safe. It didn't make sense." Linda's stomach had tightened with worry, but she'd dismissed it as James's awkward attempt at fatherhood. "If anything feels wrong, you call me immediately, okay?" Emily had nodded and trudged into school. Now standing on that corner at 3:35, Emily shifted her weight from foot to foot, checking her watch. Her father was late. Not terribly late, only 5 minutes, but James was usually punctual to the point of obsession. She pulled her jacket tighter against the cold and looked down the empty street. A blue sedan turned the corner at 3:40, moving slowly. Emily recognized it immediately. Her father's 1998 Ford Taurus. The paint faded and the rear bumper held on with wire. The car pulled up beside her and through the window she could see James's face, pale and drawn, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "Hey, Dad," Emily said as she opened the passenger door and climbed inside. The interior smelled of motor oil and something else. Damp earth maybe, or old concrete. "Emily," James said, his voice hoarse. He didn't smile. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white. "How was school?" "Fine," she replied, buckling her seatbelt. She glanced at her father, noting the dirt under his fingernails and the dark circles under his eyes. "Are you okay? You look tired." "I've been working on something," James said, pulling away from the curb. He didn't elaborate. The car moved through the quiet streets, heading west toward the outskirts of town. Emily tried to make conversation, talking about her math test and a fight that had broken out in the cafeteria, but James barely responded. He seemed distracted, his eyes constantly checking the rearview mirror as if expecting to be followed. When they stopped at a red light, his fingers drummed nervously on the steering wheel. "Dad, seriously, what's going on?" Emily asked, a thread of anxiety weaving through her voice. James finally looked at her, really looked at her, and what Emily saw in his eyes made her breath catch. There was something desperate there, something frightened and determined all at once. "I need to keep you safe," he said quietly. "The world, it's not what you think it is, Emily. There are dangers everywhere. People can't be trusted, but I can protect you. I've been preparing." "What are you talking about?" Emily's heart began to pound. "Dad, you're scaring me." "Don't be scared," James said, reaching over to pat her hand. His palm was cold and clammy. "I would never hurt you. Everything I'm doing is for you. You'll understand soon." The light turned green, and James accelerated, leaving the main roads behind. They were heading toward his property, 40 acres of wooded land his grandfather had left him, far from the center of town. Emily had been there a few times before, always feeling uneasy about how isolated it was. There was the small rental house where James lived, a dilapidated barn and acres of dense trees. "Can we just have a normal weekend?" Emily asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Maybe watch movies or something?" "We'll see," James said, but his tone suggested that normal wasn't on the agenda. They drove in silence for another 15 minutes, the landscape becoming increasingly rural. Finally, James turned onto a dirt road marked only by a rusted mailbox with the number 1847 barely visible. The road wound through thick stands of oak and pine, branches scraping against the car's sides. When they arrived at the property, Emily noticed immediately that something was different. Fresh tire tracks crisscrossed the muddy ground, and several areas near the barn showed signs of recent excavation. Mounds of dirt, tarps covering mysterious shapes, and tools scattered about. James parked the car near the house and turned off the engine. For a long moment, he just sat there, staring through the windshield at nothing. "Dad?" Emily's voice trembled now. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but they were miles from anywhere, and her phone, she remembered with sinking dread, had died during lunch at school. "I need to show you something," James said finally. He opened his door and stepped out into the gray afternoon. Emily hesitated, then followed, her legs feeling weak beneath her. James led her not toward the house but toward the barn. The structure leaned slightly to one side, its red paint long since faded to a mottled brown. The doors hung open, revealing darkness inside. "I don't want to go in there," Emily said, stopping several feet away. "Please," James said, and there was such raw pleading in his voice that Emily felt torn between fear and pity. "I need you to understand. I need you to see what I've built for us." "For us?" Emily's voice rose. "Dad, I don't live here. I live with Mom. This is just visits." "That's what I need to talk to you about," James said. He reached out his hand toward her. "Things are going to change, Emily. I can't let them take you from me. I can't let the world hurt you." Emily backed away. "You're not making sense. I want to call Mom." "Your phone is dead," James said, and Emily realized with horror that he'd known that. He'd been counting on it. "I want to leave," Emily said, her voice breaking. "Right now, take me home, Dad, please." James's expression crumbled. For a moment, he looked like he might cry. "I can't," he whispered. "I'm sorry, Emily. I can't let you go. Not when I'm this close to finishing everything. You'll be safe here. Safer than you've ever been." Emily turned and ran. She sprinted toward the dirt road, her backpack bouncing against her spine, her breath coming in gasps. Behind her, she heard her father shouting her name, heard his footsteps pounding after her. The trees blurred past, branches whipping at her face and arms. She didn't dare look back. But James was faster. He'd always been athletic, and despite his recent deterioration, he caught up to Emily within a minute. His hand closed around her arm, spinning her around. "Don't make this harder," he gasped, his face flushed with exertion. "Please, Emily, just trust me." "Let me go!" Emily screamed, fighting against his grip. "You're crazy, let me go!" What happened next would haunt the investigation for years. There was a struggle. Emily's backpack fell to the ground, its contents scattering across the dirt. James tried to restrain his daughter without hurting her, but Emily fought with the desperate strength of terror. At some point, James managed to get his arms around her, lifting her off the ground despite her kicking and screaming. He carried her back toward the barn, Emily's cries echoing through the empty woods. No one was around to hear. The nearest neighbor was 3 miles away. Inside the barn, the reality of James's obsession became clear. Most of the floor had been removed, revealing a large pit that descended deep into the earth. A ladder led down into darkness. At the bottom, barely visible in the dim light, was the shape of James's blue Ford Taurus, the very car they'd driven in, already positioned inside what appeared to be a concrete chamber. "No," Emily sobbed, understanding nothing except that something terrible was about to happen. "No, no, no, please, Dad, no." "Shh," James murmured, tears now streaming down his face. "It's okay. It's all going to be okay. I've prepared everything. You'll have food, water, air. You'll be safe down there, safe from everything. Please don't do this," Emily begged. "I promise I won't tell anyone. I promise. Just let me go home. Please, Daddy, please." But James's mind was set. Whatever rational thought had once governed him had been consumed by paranoid delusion. He believed with absolute certainty that he was saving his daughter's life. He carried her down the ladder, her struggles weakening as shock and fear overwhelmed her. At the bottom, he opened the trunk of the car, the trunk he'd modified and expanded, turning it into a small chamber with supplies, a battery-powered light, and a ventilation system connected to pipes that ran up through the barn floor to the surface. "I love you," James whispered as he placed Emily inside. "I love you so much. When the time is right, when it's safe, I'll let you out. I promise." Emily couldn't speak anymore. She just stared at her father with wide, uncomprehending eyes as he closed the trunk, sealing her in darkness. James climbed back up the ladder and spent the next 12 hours burying his car, and his daughter, beneath 3 meters of earth and concrete. By the time dawn broke on October 13th, there was no sign that anything unusual had happened on the property. The barn floor had been restored. The blue Ford Taurus had vanished completely. Later that day, when Emily didn't return home, Linda Carter called the police. By evening, when James couldn't be reached and his car was nowhere to be found, the search began. But in Springfield, Missouri in October 2002, no one thought to look beneath the ground. No one imagined that a father's love could be so twisted, so desperately misguided, that he would bury his own daughter alive in the name of protection. And so, Emily Carter disappeared, along with her father and his blue sedan, into a mystery that would consume the town for 22 years. Springfield, Missouri, October 2002 to December 2002. Linda Carter knew something was wrong the moment Emily didn't come home that Saturday evening. Her daughter was responsible, always called if plans changed, and never broke curfew without permission. When 6 o'clock passed with no word, Linda's concern turned to panic. By 7, she was calling James's phone repeatedly, each ring echoing into voicemail. "This is James Carter. Leave a message." "James, it's Linda. Where's Emily? Call me back immediately." She left 5 messages before deciding to drive to his property herself. The sun had already set, and darkness swallowed the rural roads as Linda's minivan raced westward. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her fingers ached. Traffic was light, and she made the 40-minute drive in 30, her headlights cutting through the October night. When she arrived at James's property at 7:43 p.m., the house was dark. No cars in the driveway, no lights visible through the windows. Linda parked and got out, the cold air biting at her exposed skin. She knocked on the door, then pounded when no one answered. "James! Emily!" Her voice cracked with desperation. "Open the door!" Nothing. The silence was absolute, broken only by wind rustling through the trees and the distant cry of a nightbird. Linda tried the doorknob. Locked. She walked around the perimeter of the house, peering through windows, seeing only empty rooms and furniture covered in shadows. The barn drew her attention. Its doors hung slightly open, swaying in the breeze. Linda approached cautiously, pulling out her phone and activating its small flashlight. The beam revealed the barn's interior, old farming equipment, dusty tools hanging on walls, and fresh dirt scattered across the floor. But no Emily, no James, no blue Ford Taurus. Linda called 911 at 8:02 p.m. "My daughter is missing," she told the dispatcher, her voice trembling. "She was supposed to be with her father, but they're both gone. Please, you have to help me find her." Within an hour, 2 patrol cars from the Greene County Sheriff's Office arrived at the property. Deputy Marcus Webb, a veteran officer with 20 years of experience, took Linda's statement while his partner, Deputy Sarah Hoffman, searched the grounds with a high-powered flashlight. "When did you last see your daughter?" Webb asked, his notepad open. "This morning, 7:15, I dropped her at school. She was supposed to meet James at 3:30 after classes." Linda's hands shook as she spoke. "He picks her up every other weekend. It's part of the custody agreement. And you haven't heard from either of them since?" "Nothing. James won't answer his phone. His car is gone. The house is empty." Linda's voice rose with each sentence. "Something's happened to them, I know it. James has been acting strange for months, talking about protection, about keeping Emily safe from some imaginary threat. I should have listened to my gut. I should have fought the custody arrangement." Webb exchanged a glance with Hoffman, who had returned from her search. "Mrs. Carter, I understand you're frightened, but let's not jump to conclusions. Has your ex-husband ever threatened to take Emily away? Has there been talk of custody disputes?" "No," Linda admitted. "Not exactly. But he's been unstable. His behavior has been erratic. He's paranoid, isolated. Please, you need to find them." The deputies promised to issue a bolo, be on the lookout for James Carter and his vehicle. They took descriptions. James, 41 years old, 5'10", approximately 170 pounds, brown hair, blue eyes. Emily, 14, 5'3", 110 pounds, dark brown hair, brown eyes, last seen wearing her school uniform and a denim jacket. The vehicle, a 1998 Ford Taurus, blue license plate number MO736HJK. We'll find them, Webb assured Linda, though his expression betrayed uncertainty. In most cases like this, there's a simple explanation. Maybe car trouble, maybe they decided to take a trip and forgot to call. But Linda knew better. She knew Emily would never not call, and she knew James had been deteriorating mentally for months. By Sunday morning, the search had expanded. Detective Raymond Kowalski from the Springfield Police Department took over the investigation. Kowalski was a compact man in his late 40s with iron gray hair and sharp, assessing eyes that missed nothing. He'd worked dozens of missing persons cases over his career, and something about this one immediately struck him as unusual. The father's behavior leading up to the disappearance suggests premeditation, Kowalski told his team during the morning briefing. According to the mother and James Carter's co-workers, he'd become increasingly paranoid and withdrawn. He'd been talking about protection and keeping his daughter safe. This wasn't a spontaneous decision. The investigation revealed troubling details. James's co-workers at Donnelly's Auto Repair reported that he'd been requesting unusual equipment: industrial ventilation pipes, battery-powered generators, large water containers. He'd told them he was building a storm shelter, concerned about tornadoes. Missouri was prone to severe weather, so the explanation had seemed reasonable at the time. But he also asked about preserving food long-term, said Martin Donnelly, owner of the auto shop. Talked about survival situations, about being prepared for emergencies. We thought he was just going through some kind of midlife crisis, you know? Maybe getting into that survivalist stuff. Donnelly's records showed that James had worked extensive overtime in the months leading up to October, accumulating money. His bank statements, obtained through a warrant, revealed large cash withdrawals, almost $15,000 over 6 months, and purchases from hardware stores and surplus equipment suppliers. He was planning something, Kowalski concluded. The question is what? Search teams combed the area around James's property. Cadaver dogs were brought in, sniffing through the woods and around the barn and house. They found nothing. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging flew over the region, searching for any sign of the Blue Taurus or recent activity. Again, nothing. The case attracted media attention. Local news stations ran stories about the missing teenager and her father. Emily's school photo appeared on television screens across Missouri, a smiling girl with bright eyes and a future that now hung in terrible uncertainty. Tips poured into the police hotline, but none led anywhere. Someone claimed to have seen a blue sedan heading toward Arkansas. Another reported seeing a man matching James's description at a gas station in Kansas. Both leads proved false. As days turned into weeks, the investigation hit roadblocks at every turn. James's property was searched multiple times, each more thorough than the last. Investigators examined every inch of the house, finding evidence of James's declining mental state. Notebooks filled with paranoid ramblings about societal collapse, newspaper clippings about child abductions and crimes, and diagrams of what appeared to be underground structures, but no physical evidence of Emily or her father. The diagrams, Detective Kowalski said during a team meeting in late October. These drawings of underground chambers, what if he actually built something? The team returned to the property with ground-penetrating radar, scanning the area around the barn and house. The equipment detected some anomalies, variations in soil density that could indicate disturbance, but nothing definitive enough to warrant excavation. The property covered 40 acres, and digging randomly would require resources the department simply didn't have. "We need something more concrete," Kowalski's supervisor, Captain Lisa Brennan, told him. "We can't justify tearing up an entire property on speculation." By November, the case began to cool. Without new leads or evidence, there was only so much the department could do. The prevailing theory was that James had taken Emily and fled, possibly to another state or even another country. An Amber Alert had been issued nationally, but weeks passed without a credible sighting. Linda Carter refused to give up. She organized search parties, distributed flyers, and appeared on local news programs pleading for information. "If you're out there, James, please bring her home," she said during one tearful interview. "Emily doesn't deserve this. She's just a child. Whatever you're going through, whatever you think you're protecting her from, you're wrong. You're hurting her. Please, just let her come home." But there was no response. The silence was absolute and terrifying. Thanksgiving came and went. Emily's empty chair at the Carter family dinner table served as a painful reminder of what had been lost. Linda's parents tried to comfort her, but words felt hollow against the magnitude of her grief and fear. "She's still alive," Linda insisted, though she couldn't explain how she knew. "I can feel it. She's out there somewhere, and she's alive." Detective Kowalski privately agreed, though his reasoning was more pragmatic. If James wanted to harm Emily, he would have done it locally, he told Captain Brennan. The level of planning evident here suggests a different motive. He believes he's protecting her. That means he needs her alive. Protected from what? Brennan asked. From the world, apparently. From everything he perceives as a threat. Kowalski sighed, rubbing his tired eyes. The question is where? Where could someone hide a teenage girl in this day and age? Every motel requires ID. Every rental property has paper trails. His bank accounts show no activity since October 11th, the day before Emily disappeared. So where the hell are they? The answer, buried beneath 3 meters of earth and concrete just 40 feet from where Kowalski stood during one of his property visits, remained hidden. By December, the case was officially classified as cold. The active investigation was scaled back, with Kowalski checking in periodically but dedicating most of his time to newer cases. The file on Emily Carter's disappearance grew thick with reports, witness statements, and dead-end leads, but no closer to resolution. Springfield moved on, as towns do. The media attention faded. Life continued for everyone except Linda Carter, who remained frozen in that terrible moment when her daughter vanished. She kept Emily's room exactly as it had been. Clothes still in the closet, posters still on the walls, homework still on the desk. And beneath the cold Missouri ground, in darkness and silence, Emily Carter remained alive, trapped in her father's twisted vision of salvation, beginning a nightmare that would last 22 years. Underground Chamber, October 2002 to 2010. The darkness was absolute. Emily Carter had never experienced such complete absence of light. When her father first sealed her in the trunk, she'd screamed until her throat was raw, pounded on the metal walls until her hands were bruised and bleeding, and sobbed until no more tears would come. Then came the silence, a crushing, suffocating silence broken only by her own ragged breathing and the thunder of her heartbeat in her ears. She had no concept of how much time passed before the battery-powered light flickered on. It was dim, casting weak yellow light through the modified trunk space her father had created. Emily blinked, her eyes adjusting, and took in her surroundings with growing horror. The trunk had been expanded and reinforced, transformed into a small chamber, approximately 6 feet long, 4 feet wide, and 3 feet high. She couldn't stand, could barely sit upright. Along one wall were plastic containers of water and boxes of non-perishable food, granola bars, canned goods, crackers. A bucket in the corner served as a makeshift toilet. Ventilation pipes ran along the ceiling, presumably bringing air from the surface. A small digital clock on the wall read 3:47 a.m., though Emily had no idea if it was accurate or what day it even was. This couldn't be real. This had to be a nightmare. Her father who had pushed her on swings as a child, who had taught her to ride a bicycle, who had called her his little princess, had buried her alive. Emily's mind struggled to process the impossibility of her situation. She was underground, sealed inside a car trunk, with no way out. The walls pressed in on her, the limited space making it hard to breathe despite the ventilation. Panic rose in her chest, threatening to consume her entirely. "Help!" she screamed, her voice hoarse. "Somebody help me, I'm down here, help!" She screamed until her voice gave out, knowing even as she did that no one could hear her beneath meters of earth. She was alone, completely, terrifyingly alone. Days passed. She counted them by the intervals when she slept and woke, though her sleep schedule quickly became chaotic. The clock helped maintain some sense of time, but the unchanging darkness and isolation played tricks on her mind. Sometimes she thought she heard sounds from above, footsteps, scraping, movement. Other times, the silence was so profound, she wondered if she'd gone deaf. On what she believed was the 4th day, a pipe in the ceiling opened and a folded piece of paper fell through, landing beside her. Emily's hands shook as she unfolded it, recognizing her father's handwriting. "Emily, I know you're frightened and angry. I know you don't understand why I've done this. Someday you will. The world above is dangerous, full of people who would hurt you, corrupt you, take you away from me. Down there you're safe. I've given you everything you need to survive. I'll send food and supplies regularly. The ventilation system provides fresh air. The water is filtered and clean. You have light, blankets, books. I've thought of everything. This is temporary. When the danger passes, when I know you'll be truly safe, I'll bring you back up. Until then, you must trust me. I'm your father. Everything I do is because I love you. Please don't hate me." Dad Emily read the letter 3 times, each reading filling her with fresh waves of horror and disbelief. Her father was insane. He had to be. There was no danger above ground, no threat that justified this imprisonment. He'd buried her alive because of delusions, paranoid fantasies that existed only in his fractured mind. She tried to write back, using a pencil she found among the supplies, scrawling desperate pleas on the back of his letter. "Please let me out. I'm scared. I want to see Mom. Please, Dad, this is wrong. You're hurting me, not protecting me, please." She folded the paper and held it up toward the pipe, hoping he would retrieve it. Hours later, the pipe opened again, and she felt the paper pulled upward. For a moment, hope flickered. Maybe her words would reach him. Maybe he would realize his mistake and free her. The next paper that came through days later shattered that hope. "I can't let you out yet. I'm sorry. Be strong. I love you." That was when Emily understood the full scope of her nightmare. Her father wasn't going to change his mind. He wasn't going to have a moment of clarity and release her. This was real, and it was going to continue. She was truly buried alive, and no one was coming to save her. The psychological toll was immediate and devastating. Emily, a bright 14-year-old girl who had been planning her high school classes and thinking about college, now existed in a space smaller than a closet, with no human contact, no sunlight, no connection to the world beyond the dirt and concrete above her head. She developed routines to maintain her sanity. Every morning, or what she decided was morning based on the clock, she would do stretches within the limited space, trying to keep her muscles from atrophy. She rationed the food carefully, not knowing when the next supply drop would come. She read the few books her father had included, mostly survivalist manuals and religious texts that made her sick with their irony. She talked to herself, maintaining the sound of a human voice, even if it was only her own. The supply drops came irregularly through the pipe system James had installed. Canned food, bottled water, batteries for the light, toilet paper, occasional changes of clothing. Sometimes there were letters from James, explaining his twisted logic, professing his love, insisting this was all necessary. Emily stopped reading them after the first month, unable to bear the cognitive dissonance of a father who claimed to love her while keeping her buried underground. Months became a year. Emily turned 15 in the darkness, alone, marked only by a small cupcake that came through the supply pipe with a note that read, "Happy birthday, Princess." She didn't eat it. She couldn't. Her body changed during that first year underground. Lack of sunlight made her pale, her skin almost translucent in the artificial light. Her muscles weakened despite her attempts at exercise. Her menstrual cycle became irregular from stress and malnutrition. She lost weight, her clothes hanging loose on her diminishing frame. The psychological changes were even more profound. She developed symptoms of severe anxiety and depression, experienced dissociative episodes where she felt disconnected from her own body, and had recurring nightmares whenever she managed to sleep. But Emily Carter was a survivor. Deep within her, beneath the trauma and fear, was a core of steel inherited from her mother's stubborn determination and her father's, ironically, mechanical problem-solving mind. She began to study her prison, looking for weaknesses, understanding the systems that kept her alive and imprisoned. The ventilation system was sophisticated. James had engineered it carefully with pipes running up through the earth to the surface, filtered to prevent contamination, powered by a generator somewhere above ground. The supply pipe was too narrow for her to climb through, but it proved that there were connections to the surface. The car itself, she realized, had been modified extensively before burial. The trunk space had been expanded by removing the back seats, creating more room. The metal walls had been reinforced and insulated. Emily started keeping a journal on scraps of paper, documenting everything. Her daily routines, her physical and mental state, the timing of supply drops, her observations about the chamber. Writing gave her purpose, a way to maintain her sense of self when everything else was being stripped away. She addressed the entries to her mother, imagining that someday, somehow, Linda would read them and know that Emily had never stopped fighting. Day 437, approximately. "Mom, I'm still here. Still alive. Dad sent down a portable radio today. I can hear music, news, other voices. It helps. The announcers talked about a missing girl from Springfield. I wonder if they meant me. I wonder if you're still looking. I hope you haven't given up. Day 582. I've started exercising more. Push-ups, sit-ups, stretches. Anything to feel strong. Anything to remind myself I'm still real, still human. Sometimes I forget what the sun feels like. I try to remember the warmth on my face, but the memory gets harder to hold on to. Day 891. 3 years, Mom. It's been 3 years since I've seen the sky. Sometimes I think about what I'm missing. High school, friends, normal life. I should be 17 now. I should be learning to drive, thinking about prom, applying to colleges. Instead, I'm in this box underground and I don't know if I'll ever get out. The years blurred together. Emily's 16th birthday passed, then her 17th, her 18th. She became an adult in the darkness, her adolescence stolen by her father's madness. The supply drops continued with mechanical regularity. James never appeared in person, never opened the chamber to see what his protection had done to his daughter. The letters from James became less frequent but more disturbing. His handwriting deteriorated, his messages increasingly incoherent. He wrote about threats from government agencies, about conspiracies, about dangers that justified keeping Emily hidden. His mental state was clearly worsening, but from Emily's perspective, it hardly mattered. Whether he was delusional or evil or both, the result was the same. She remained buried alive, year after year. By 2010, Emily had been underground for 8 years. She was 22 years old, though she looked both older and younger, aged by trauma, preserved by isolation. Her hair had grown long, her body had adapted to the confined space, her mind had developed coping mechanisms that bordered on dissociation. She could go hours without conscious thought, existing in a meditative state that protected her from the psychological horror of her situation. But she never stopped hoping. Even in the darkest moments when despair threatened to consume her entirely, Emily held on to the belief that somehow, someday, she would be free. She had to believe it. The alternative, that this underground tomb would be her entire existence, was too terrible to accept. Day 2, 9:20. Mom, if you're reading this, it means I survived. It means I got out. 8 years. I've been down here for 8 years. I don't know if I'm still the daughter you remember. I don't know if I'm even still human anymore. But I'm alive. And as long as I'm alive, there's hope. Don't ever stop looking for me. Please don't ever stop. Above ground, the search had long since ended. The file on Emily Carter's disappearance gathered dust in the Springfield Police Department archives. Linda Carter still maintained hope, still marked each birthday, still believed her daughter lived. But the world had moved on, and beneath the earth, in a chamber no one knew existed, Emily waited in the darkness. Springfield, Missouri, 2010 to 2024. The second decade of Emily Carter's imprisonment brought changes both above and below ground. James Carter, now in his early 60s, had become a ghost in Springfield. He rarely left his property, and when he did, neighbors reported seeing a gaunt, hollow-eyed man who muttered to himself and avoided eye contact. His hair had gone completely white, his face deeply lined, his hands trembling with what might have been Parkinson's or simply the physical manifestation of guilt and madness. At Donnelly's Auto Repair, James had been let go in 2008 after his work became unreliable and his behavior increasingly erratic. Martin Donnelly had tried to be understanding. James had been a good mechanic once, but the man was clearly unwell. He would show up at odd hours talking about maintaining the system and ensuring she stays safe. When pressed about who she was, James would become agitated and defensive. I think he finally lost it completely, Donnelly told his wife over dinner one evening. Poor bastard never recovered from losing his daughter. I heard he's living like a hermit out there on that property, barely maintaining the place. What Donnelly and everyone else in Springfield didn't know was that James had been maintaining something far more complex than his property. Every day, without fail, James tended to the underground chamber that held his daughter. He checked the ventilation system, ensured the generator had fuel, prepared supply drops, and monitored the concealed pipes that connected Emily's tomb to the surface. It was a full-time job keeping someone alive underground, and James had become obsessively meticulous about it. His journals from this period, later recovered by investigators, revealed the deterioration of his mental state. The entries started coherently enough, but devolved into paranoid rambling and religious fervor. January 15, 2010. Emily is safe. The ventilation system needs maintenance. Replaced filter number 3. She doesn't understand yet, but she will. When society collapses, when the chaos comes, she'll be protected. I've saved her. July 3, 2011. They're watching the property. Black cars on the road. Government agents? I've covered my tracks well. They won't find her. No one will ever find her. She's mine to protect. December 22, 2013. Emily stopped responding to my letters years ago. I still write them. I still send supplies. She's alive down there, I know she is. The food disappears, the system works. She's alive and safe. That's all that matters. April 8, 2015. I'm getting old. My hands shake. My memory fails sometimes. What happens to Emily if I die? I need to make arrangements, but I can't tell anyone. They wouldn't understand. They'd call me a monster. I'm not a monster. I'm her protector. Underground, Emily had long since passed through the acute phases of her psychological trauma and entered a state of grim acceptance. She was 24 years old in 2012, 28 in 2016, 32 in 2020. An entire adult life lived in a space the size of a large coffin, her existence reduced to basic survival and the preservation of her sanity through sheer force of will. The supply drops had become her only connection to the outside world. Through them, she could gauge the passage of time, the changing seasons by the types of food that came down, and occasionally, fragments of the world above. Once, a newspaper clipping fell through with supplies, dated June 2014, announcing a new highway expansion project in Greene County. Emily had stared at it for hours, touching the paper, imagining the world where such mundane things mattered. Her body had adapted to the confinement in disturbing ways. Her muscles had atrophied significantly. Her spine curved from years of being unable to stand fully upright. Her eyesight had deteriorated from the lack of natural light despite the artificial illumination. She suffered from chronic pain in her joints and back. Her teeth, despite her best efforts at hygiene with the supplies provided, had developed cavities and damage. She looked decades older than her actual age, but her mind, remarkably, had found ways to survive. Emily had developed elaborate mental landscapes, entire worlds she could explore in her imagination. She recited poetry she'd memorized in school, solved complex math problems in her head, composed songs and stories. She taught herself meditation techniques, managing her breathing and heart rate to combat the panic attacks that still occasionally struck. She had become, in some ways, more mentally disciplined than most people who lived free lives above ground. Day 5475. I am 30 years old today. 30 years old, and I've spent more than half my life buried alive. I've been thinking about what I would do if I ever got out. Would I be able to function in the world? Would sunlight blind me? Would open spaces terrify me? I've adapted so completely to this prison that freedom itself might destroy me, but I'd still take that chance. God, I'd take it in a heartbeat. In 2018, James suffered his first stroke. It was minor, causing temporary numbness in his left arm and some confusion, but it terrified him. He was 77 years old and his body was failing. He began obsessively documenting the location and operation of Emily's chamber, writing detailed instructions that no one would ever read. He drew maps, created diagrams, explained the ventilation system and supply protocols. In his demented logic, he was creating a manual for whoever might need to continue his work after his death. But James told no one. He had no friends, no close family, no confidants who could be trusted with his secret. He was utterly alone with his crime, and as his health deteriorated, the question of what would happen to Emily after his death loomed larger. The answer came in March 2020, at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. James suffered a massive stroke while working on the property. He collapsed near the barn, alone, and lay there for 3 hours before managing to crawl to his house and call for help. The ambulance arrived to find him barely conscious, unable to speak, the left side of his body paralyzed. At Springfield Mercy Hospital, doctors stabilized James but gave a grim prognosis. Severe brain damage, significant disability, uncertain recovery. He would need long-term care, possibly for the rest of his life. Social services were contacted to arrange for his transfer to a nursing facility since he had no family to care for him. Does he have any children, anyone we should contact? Asked the hospital social worker, reviewing James's nearly empty file. The attending nurse shook her head. According to his records, he had a daughter who went missing back in 2002. Never found. The mother's contact information is in the file, but given the circumstances, don't call her, the social worker decided. It would just cause more pain. He's essentially alone in the world. What none of them knew was that beneath James's property, Emily had noticed something terrifying. The supply drops had stopped. Days passed with no food, no water, no contact. The ventilation system continued running, powered by the automatic generator, but nothing came through the pipe. For the first time in 18 years, Emily was completely cut off. Panic set in immediately. She had perhaps 2 weeks of water left, less of food. The ventilation might continue, but without supplies she would die of dehydration in the darkness. After surviving nearly 2 decades of imprisonment, she might die alone because her captor had finally abandoned her, or died himself. Emily pounded on the walls of her prison, screaming until her voice was gone. She tried desperately to break through the metal trunk walls with her bare hands, succeeding only in bloodying her knuckles. She attempted to climb up the supply pipe, but it was too narrow and she was too weak. After 18 years of captivity, her body simply didn't have the strength for such efforts. Day 6 to 9:35. The supplies stopped 5 days ago. I'm rationing what's left, but it won't last. Is he dead? Has he finally died and left me here to starve? I survived 18 years of this hell only to die alone in the dark because that sick bastard couldn't even be bothered to tell someone where I am. I'm so angry. I'm so scared. Mom, if you're out there, I'm still here. I'm still alive. Please, someone find me. Please. Above ground, James Carter was transferred to Sunrise Meadows Nursing Home on April 2, 2020. He could not speak, could barely move, and his cognitive function was severely impaired. He would spend the next 4 years in that facility, locked inside his own failing body, unable to tell anyone about the daughter he'd buried alive. Whether he thought about Emily in those final years, whether he felt remorse or maintained his delusional conviction that he'd done the right thing, no one would ever know. His property sat abandoned. With no one to pay the taxes or maintain it, the land fell into disrepair. The county sent notices about the delinquent taxes, but with James incapacitated and no next of kin, the property entered a lengthy bureaucratic process toward eventual foreclosure and auction. Emily, meanwhile, was dying slowly in her underground tomb. She stretched her supplies as far as possible, drinking her remaining water in tiny sips, eating half a granola bar every other day. Her body, already weakened by 18 years of confinement, began to shut down from malnutrition and dehydration. She slipped in and out of consciousness, hallucinating conversations with her mother, seeing sunlight that wasn't there, feeling grass beneath her feet in dreams. Day 6,947. Can't write much. Too weak. No water left. This is how it ends. I'm sorry, Mom. I tried so hard to survive. I wanted to see you again. I wanted to tell you I never stopped loving you, never stopped hoping. Tell them I was here. Tell them I fought. Tell them. The entry ended there, the pencil falling from Emily's hand as unconsciousness claimed her. She should have died. By all logic and medical probability, Emily Carter should have died in that underground chamber in April 2020. Her body eventually discovered years later as a tragic postscript to a decades-old mystery. But fate, or luck, or divine intervention, depending on one's perspective, had other plans. In June 2024, Greene County finally completed the foreclosure process on James Carter's property. The land was scheduled for auction, but before it could be sold, county regulations required an environmental assessment and survey. A team of assessors arrived at the overgrown property to document its condition and identify any potential hazards or contamination. One of the assessors, a young woman named Rachel Kim, noticed something odd about the ground near the collapsed barn. The soil had settled unevenly, creating a slight depression, and the vegetation growth was different, less dense, suggesting underground voids or structures. She recommended a ground-penetrating radar survey before the sale. The radar scan revealed something extraordinary, a large regular structure approximately 3 meters below the surface, consistent with buried metal. Initially, they suspected an old septic tank or fuel storage container, but the shape was wrong, too uniform, too deliberately placed. We need to excavate this, Rachel told her supervisor. It could be environmental contamination, buried waste, or something worse. We can't sell the property without knowing what's down there. On August 15, 2024, an excavation crew arrived at the Carter property with a backhoe and began carefully digging near the barn. Within hours, they'd uncovered what appeared to be the roof of a buried vehicle, a blue Ford Taurus, its paint faded but still visible, sealed beneath concrete and earth. The crew stopped immediately and called the sheriff's department. This wasn't normal. This was evidence of something deeply wrong. Detective James Martinez, the investigator who responded, felt ice in his veins as he stared at the partially uncovered car. He'd been with the Springfield Police Department for 15 years, but had heard the stories about the old Carter case, the missing teenager and her father who vanished in 2002, the unsolved mystery that had haunted the department for decades. "Get forensics here," Martinez ordered, "and find out who owns this property. We may have just found Emily Carter." Springfield, Missouri, August 2024. Detective James Martinez stood at the edge of the excavation site, watching as forensic teams carefully removed layers of concrete and earth from around the buried vehicle. The August sun beat down mercilessly, heat shimmering off the exposed metal of the blue Ford Taurus. Sweat dripped down Martinez's face, but he barely noticed. His entire focus was on the car emerging from the ground like a metal coffin. "How long has this been down here?" asked Rachel Kim, the assessor who had discovered the anomaly. She stood beside Martinez, her face pale with dawning horror as she realized what they might have found. "If this is James Carter's vehicle, then 22 years, Martinez replied, his voice tight. "Since October 2002. "My God," Rachel whispered. "You don't think, could someone still be?" "Let's not speculate until we know what we're dealing with." Martinez cut her off, though his own thoughts were racing along the same terrible path. Could Emily Carter have been down there all this time? And if so, could she possibly still be alive after more than 2 decades buried underground? It seemed impossible. But then again, the entire situation was impossible. Who buries a car 3 meters underground? Who seals it in concrete? This wasn't an accident or a simple burial. This was deliberate, engineered, premeditated. The excavation took most of the day. The crew had to work carefully, documenting everything, photographing each layer as it was removed. By late afternoon, the entire vehicle was exposed, sitting in a pit surrounded by investigators, crime scene technicians, and emergency medical personnel standing by just in case, though no one seriously believed they'd find anyone alive. Martinez examined the car closely. The windows had been sealed with some kind of resin, making it impossible to see inside. Thick pipes ran from the roof of the vehicle up through the earth. Ventilation, he realized. Someone had engineered this to sustain life underground. His stomach twisted with the implications. "We've got an access point here," called out Sarah Chen, one of the forensic technicians. She was examining the trunk. "Looks like it's been modified. The lock's been removed and replaced with some kind of custom mechanism." Martinez approached, his heart pounding. "Can you open it?" "Working on it now," Chen said, carefully examining the mechanism. "It's sophisticated. Multiple seals to maintain air pressure. Whoever designed this knew what they were doing." The afternoon sun was beginning to lower toward the horizon when Chen finally got the mechanism open. She stepped back, allowing Martinez to approach. He could hear something now, a faint humming from inside, electrical equipment still running after all these years. "On 3, Martinez said, gripping the handle. 1, 2, 3. He pulled the trunk open, and the smell hit him immediately. Not the smell of death, but of human habitation. Stale air, sweat, waste, confined living. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing the modified interior. And there, curled in the fetal position on a thin mattress, was a woman. She was skeletal, her skin gray and papery, her hair long and matted, her body barely moving with shallow breaths. But she was breathing. Against all odds, against every law of probability, Emily Carter was alive. "Medical, now!" Martinez shouted, his voice cracking with shock and urgency. Paramedics rushed forward with a gurney and equipment. The lead paramedic, a veteran named Tom Richardson, dropped into the pit and immediately began assessment while his team prepared IV lines and oxygen. Female, approximately mid-30s, severely dehydrated and malnourished. Richardson called out, "Pulse is weak and thready, respiration shallow, blood pressure dangerously low. She's alive, but barely. We need to move fast." Emily didn't wake as they carefully extracted her from the trunk. Her body was frighteningly light, her limbs thin as branches, her spine visibly curved from years of confinement. As they lifted her onto the gurney, Martinez saw the scars on her hands, evidence of attempts to escape, of years of desperate scratching at metal walls. "Get her to Mercy Hospital," Martinez ordered. "Code 3, lights and sirens. And I want security on her room immediately. This is an active investigation, and until we know the full story, no one talks to the press about her condition." The ambulance screamed away from the property, carrying Emily Carter toward her first glimpse of sunlight in 22 years. Martinez remained at the excavation site, staring into the chamber where a woman had been imprisoned for more than 2 decades. The space was perhaps 6 feet long and 4 feet wide. Emily had lived her entire adult life unable to stand fully upright, unable to take more than 3 steps in any direction. Jesus Christ, breathed Officer David Park, who had arrived to help secure the scene. How did she survive this? How is she even sane? I don't know if she is, Martinez said quietly. He gestured to the forensic teams. Document everything, every inch of this chamber. I want photographs, measurements, evidence bags for any writings, personal items, anything that tells us what happened here. And search the property, the house, the barn, everything. James Carter planned this meticulously. There have to be journals, diagrams, something that explains why. The sun set as the investigation continued under portable lights. Inside the house, investigators found exactly what Martinez had predicted. Boxes of journals, notebooks filled with increasingly deranged writings, diagrams of the underground chamber's construction, maintenance logs for the ventilation system. It was all there. A comprehensive record of James Carter's descent into madness and his decision to protect his daughter by burying her alive. "Detective, you need to see this," called Detective Lisa Wong from the house. She emerged holding a thick ledger. It's a supply log. He documented every single supply drop for 22 years. Food, water, batteries, everything. The last entry is dated March 15, 2020. 4 years ago, Martinez calculated. She's been down there without supplies for 4 years? According to this, yes. Jesus. She must have been in that trunk dying slowly while we were all just living our lives up here, completely unaware. At Springfield Mercy Hospital, Emily Carter was rushed into the intensive care unit. Dr. Patricia Reynolds, the attending physician, had worked in emergency medicine for 30 years, but she'd never seen anything like this case. Severe malnutrition, extreme dehydration, muscle atrophy, possible organ damage, vitamin deficiencies across the board. Dr. Reynolds recited to her team as they worked frantically to stabilize their patient. "She's in multi-organ failure. I don't know how she's still alive. Get her on IV fluids, but carefully. Her system can't handle rapid rehydration. Start broad-spectrum antibiotics. I want full labs, imaging, everything." Emily remained unconscious as the medical team fought to save her life. Her body temperature was dangerously low, her blood pressure barely registering, her kidneys on the verge of failure. The next 24 hours would be critical. In the waiting room, Detective Martinez made the call he'd been dreading. He'd tracked down Linda Carter, Emily's mother, who still lived in Springfield. She was now 63 years old, her hair gray, her face lined with the weight of 22 years of grief and unanswered questions. "Mrs. Carter, this is Detective James Martinez with the Springfield Police Department. I need you to come to Mercy Hospital immediately." "Why? What's happened?" Linda's voice was wary. The police had brought her nothing but pain over the years. Martinez took a deep breath. "We found your daughter. Emily is alive." The silence on the other end lasted so long Martinez thought the call had dropped. Then came a sound, half sob, half gasp, and Linda's voice, broken and disbelieving. "That's not possible. You're lying. She's in the ICU right now. She's in critical condition, but she's alive, Mrs. Carter. I need you to come to the hospital." "I'm on my way. Oh God, I'm on my way." Linda arrived 20 minutes later, running through the hospital corridors, tears streaming down her face. Martinez met her outside the ICU, gently taking her arm to steady her. "Before you see her, I need to prepare you," he said quietly. "Emily has been through an unimaginable ordeal. She's been held underground for 22 years. Her appearance is, Mrs. Carter, she's going to look very different from the 14-year-old girl you remember." "I don't care," Linda said fiercely. "I don't care what she looks like. She's my daughter. I need to see her." Dr. Reynolds met them at the ICU entrance. "She's stable for now, but her condition is extremely critical. She hasn't regained consciousness. We don't know yet what the neurological impact might be from years of confinement and recent severe dehydration. I need you to be prepared for the possibility that even if she physically recovers, the psychological trauma." "Can I see her?" Linda interrupted. Dr. Reynolds nodded and led her to Emily's room. Linda stopped at the doorway, her hand flying to her mouth as she saw the figure in the hospital bed. The woman lying there barely resembled a human being, skeletal, pale as paper, her body connected to multiple IV lines and monitoring equipment. But Linda would have known her daughter anywhere. "Emily, she whispered, moving to the bedside. She took the thin, cold hand in hers, careful of the IV line. "Baby, I'm here. Mom's here. You're safe now. You're finally safe." Emily's eyelids fluttered but didn't open. On the monitors, her heart rate increased slightly. Some part of her, even in unconsciousness, recognized her mother's voice. Linda sat beside the bed and began to talk, pouring out 22 years of accumulated words. She talked about the searches, about never giving up hope, about Emily's room that she'd kept exactly the same, about birthdays and Christmases and all the moments they'd missed. She talked until her voice was hoarse, holding her daughter's hand, willing her to fight to survive, to come back. In the hallway, Martinez conferred with his team. "Where's James Carter now?" "Sunrise Meadows Nursing Home," Officer Park reported. "He's been there since 2020, following a massive stroke, essentially comatose. The nursing home staff confirmed he's had no visitors and limited cognitive function. I want someone there immediately. Even if he can't speak, I want him under guard. If he regains any awareness, I want him arrested." "On what charges?" "Kidnapping, false imprisonment, child abuse, endangerment, and that's just for starters," Martinez said grimly. "We'll add more as we build the case. That man buried his daughter alive for 22 years. I'm going to make sure he faces justice for every single day. But justice would have to wait." At Sunrise Meadows Nursing Home, the officer dispatched to guard James Carter found that justice had already been served in its own way. James Carter, 73 years old, had died 3 hours earlier of cardiac arrest. He had taken his secrets, his twisted justifications, and his madness with him to the grave. Back at the hospital as dawn broke on August 16th, 2024, Emily Carter's eyes finally opened. She stared at the ceiling, at the fluorescent lights, at the white walls of the hospital room, the first non-underground space she'd seen in 22 years. Her gaze moved slowly, taking in the monitors, the IV lines, and finally, the woman sitting beside her bed, gray-haired and weeping. "Mom," Emily's voice was barely a whisper, hoarse from disuse and damage. Linda Carter's face transformed, joy and agony and relief mixing together. "Yes, baby. Yes, I'm here. You're safe now. You're finally safe." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "I knew you'd find me. I knew you wouldn't stop looking." "Never," Linda sobbed. "I never stopped. Not for one day." Outside the hospital room, Detective Martinez watched through the window as mother and daughter were reunited after 22 years. His phone was already ringing. The press had gotten wind of the story, and the entire nation would soon be gripped by the incredible, horrifying tale of Emily Carter's survival. But for now, in this moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was that Emily Carter was alive, was free, and was finally home. Springfield, Missouri, August to December 2024. The story broke like a thunderclap across the nation. Within hours of Emily Carter's discovery, news outlets from coast to coast were reporting what many called the Missouri Miracle. A woman found alive after 22 years buried underground in her father's car. The details were almost too horrific to believe, yet they were all true, documented in James Carter's obsessive journals and confirmed by physical evidence at the excavation site. Springfield Mercy Hospital became a media circus overnight. News vans lined the parking lot, reporters clamoring for information, camera crews filming the building from every angle. Inside, hospital security worked overtime to protect Emily's privacy, while she fought for her life in the ICU. Dr. Patricia Reynolds held a press conference on August 18th, carefully choosing her words. "Ms. Carter's condition remains critical, but stable. She is suffering from severe malnutrition, dehydration, muscle atrophy, and vitamin deficiencies. She has significant physical damage from years of confinement, including spinal curvature, joint deterioration, and vision impairment. The road to physical recovery will be long and difficult." A reporter shouted from the crowd, "What about her mental state? Has she been able to speak about her ordeal?" Dr. Reynolds' expression tightened. "Ms. Carter is undergoing psychological evaluation and treatment. What she endured is beyond most people's comprehension. I would ask that everyone respect her privacy and her need to heal. She is not giving interviews, and we will not be providing details about her psychological condition." But the public's hunger for information was insatiable. The story had everything: mystery, survival, horror, and an ending that seemed miraculous despite its tragedy. Talk shows discussed it endlessly. Psychologists appeared on television to explain how someone could survive such prolonged isolation. Engineering experts analyzed James Carter's underground chamber, marveling at its terrible sophistication. Detective Martinez led the criminal investigation, though with James Carter dead, there would never be a trial. Still, the case needed to be officially closed, and the full scope of what had happened needed to be documented for the record. "We've recovered 17 journals from the Carter property," Martinez told Captain Lisa Brennan during a briefing. "They detail everything: his deteriorating mental state, his paranoid delusions about protecting Emily from the world, the construction of the chamber, 22 years of maintenance logs. It's the most comprehensive documentation of a crime I've ever seen." "What was his motive?" Brennan asked. "Beyond the obvious mental illness?" According to the journals, he genuinely believed he was saving her. After the divorce, he became convinced that society was collapsing, that dangers were everywhere, that Emily would be corrupted or harmed if she remained in the world. He saw the underground chamber as a protective shelter, not a prison. "That's insane." "Yes," Martinez agreed grimly, "but it was methodical insanity. He planned for years, built elaborate systems to keep her alive, maintained everything with obsessive care. He loved her, in his twisted way. That's what makes this so disturbing. This wasn't random violence or cruelty for its own sake. This was a father who loved his daughter so much and so wrongly that he buried her alive to protect her." The investigation revealed other disturbing details. James had stolen Emily's social security checks for years, forging documents to claim she was living with him. He'd isolated himself completely to avoid suspicion, cutting off friends and family, becoming a hermit whose eccentricity raised eyebrows but never enough alarm to trigger investigation. The system had failed Emily Carter at every level. The police who couldn't find her, the social workers who didn't follow up, the neighbors who noticed oddness but never reported it. Could she have been found sooner? A reporter asked Martinez during a press conference. The question haunted him. The property was searched multiple times in 2002 and 2003. We even used ground-penetrating radar in some areas. But the chamber was deep, carefully concealed, and we had 40 acres to cover. With the resources and technology available then, and without specific evidence pointing to underground burial, it was like searching for a needle in a haystack. He paused, his expression pained. Could we have done more? Should we have done more? Those are questions that will stay with me forever. Linda Carter, meanwhile, maintained a constant vigil at her daughter's bedside. She'd waited 22 years for this reunion, and now that Emily was finally here, Linda refused to leave except when doctors insisted. She talked to Emily constantly, filling the hospital room with stories and memories, rebuilding the connection that had been severed so violently in October 2002. Emily's physical recovery was agonizingly slow. Her body had adapted to confinement in ways that made normal movement difficult. Physical therapists worked with her daily, teaching her to stand again, to walk, to use muscles that had atrophied over 2 decades. The first time Emily stood upright, tears streamed down her face, not from pain, though there was plenty of that, but from the simple wonder of being vertical, of seeing the world from a standing position. "I forgot how tall the world is," she whispered to her mother. "Everything seems so big." The psychological recovery was even more challenging. Dr. Sarah Mendez, a trauma specialist brought in to work with Emily, explained the complexity to Linda in a private consultation. Emily has spent more than half her life in extreme confinement and isolation. She's developed coping mechanisms that allowed her to survive psychologically, but those same mechanisms will make adjustment to normal life very difficult. She experiences severe anxiety in open spaces, has difficulty processing multiple sensory inputs simultaneously, and struggles with the concept of freedom itself. After so many years where every aspect of her existence was controlled and contained, having choices is overwhelming. "But she will recover?" Linda asked desperately. "She can have a normal life." Dr. Mendez chose her words carefully. "Emily is remarkably resilient. The fact that she maintained her sanity at all is extraordinary. But normal is a relative term. She'll never be the same person she would have been without this trauma. The goal is to help her build a life where she can experience joy, connection, and purpose, whatever form that takes for her." Emily's first interview with Detective Martinez took place in late August, conducted gently in her hospital room with Dr. Mendez present. Martinez needed her statement for the official record, though he approached the conversation with extreme sensitivity. "Emily, I need to ask you about your time underground," Martinez said softly. "I know this is difficult, but anything you can tell us will help us close the investigation." Emily stared out the hospital window, watching clouds drift across blue sky. a sight she'd been denied for 22 years. What do you want to know? Can you tell me about the first day, when your father took you to the property? Emily's voice was flat, emotionless as she recounted the events of October 12, 2002. The words came out like a rehearsed speech, something she'd told herself so many times in the darkness that it had become a story about someone else. Martinez listened, taking notes, his stomach churning with anger and sorrow. The supplies stopped coming in March 2020, Emily continued. I didn't know why. I thought maybe he'd died or abandoned me or decided to let me starve. I had about 2 weeks of food and water left. I rationed it as long as I could, but eventually I ran out. I should have died. I don't know why I didn't. The doctors say your body entered a state of extreme metabolic slowdown, Martinez explained. Essentially, you were so malnourished that your system shut down non-essential functions to preserve life. You were in a kind of hibernation state. For 4 years, your father had built the chamber well. The ventilation continued running. The temperature remained stable. And your body? Martinez struggled for words. Emily, you're a survivor in the most literal sense. You endured something that should have killed you a dozen times over. I kept journals, Emily said suddenly, written on any paper I could find. Thousands of pages. Did you find them? We did. We recovered everything from the chamber. The journals are in evidence, but once the case is officially closed, they'll be returned to you. Emily nodded slowly. I wrote to my mom. Every day I wrote to her. I wanted her to know I never stopped hoping she'd find me. By September, Emily had recovered enough to be transferred from the ICU to a private recovery wing. The hospital had arranged for a ground floor room with a small outdoor patio. Dr. Mendez suggested that gradual exposure to open space would help Emily adjust. The first time Emily stepped outside, she froze in the doorway, overwhelmed by the vastness of the sky, the brightness of sunlight, the sounds of birds and wind and distant traffic. It's too much, she gasped, retreating back inside. I can't. There's too much. Linda held her daughter, letting her hide her face against her shoulder. It's okay, baby. We'll go slow as you need. They tried again the next day, and the next, each time Emily venturing a bit farther onto the patio, staying a bit longer. She wore sunglasses to protect eyes that had known only artificial light for 22 years. She held her mother's hand like a lifeline. Slowly, painfully, she began to reclaim her place in the world. The national media attention brought both support and intrusion. A GoFundMe campaign for Emily's medical expenses raised over $2 million in a week. Publishers offered six-figure advances for her story. Film producers wanted to option the rights. Linda, acting as Emily's guardian and protector, turned down everything. My daughter is not a spectacle, Linda told reporters firmly. She is a human being who endured unimaginable horror and is now trying to heal. When and if she decides to share her story publicly, that will be her choice. Until then, I'm asking everyone to respect her privacy and give her space to recover. But privacy was hard to come by. Strangers recognized Emily from news photos whenever she ventured out for medical appointments. Some were kind, offering words of support. Others were intrusive, asking invasive questions or trying to take pictures. Emily quickly learned to keep her head down, to avoid eye contact, to stay close to her mother or security. It's like I'm still in a prison, Emily told Dr. Mendez during a therapy session in October. Just a different kind. People stare at me like I'm some kind of curiosity. They want to know what it was like, how I survived, what I'm feeling. Everyone wants a piece of me, and I barely have enough of myself left for me. That's a natural response, Dr. Mendez said. You've spent 22 years in total isolation, and now you're thrust into public scrutiny. Both extremes are traumatic in their own ways. We need to find a middle ground, a life where you have connection without violation, visibility without exploitation. In November, Emily was finally discharged from the hospital. Linda had prepared a bedroom in her house, not Emily's old room, which remained preserved as a shrine to the 14-year-old who had vanished, but a new space designed with Emily's current needs in mind. The room was small but not claustrophobic, with adjustable lighting, blackout curtains for when stimulation became overwhelming, and direct access to an enclosed garden where Emily could be outside without feeling exposed. Welcome home, sweetheart, Linda said as Emily entered the house for the first time in 22 years. Emily stood in the living room, looking around at furniture she half remembered, at family photos on the walls that showed her as a child, at a world that had continued without her. She saw photos of her mother at different ages, the gray hair, The deepened lines around her eyes, the physical evidence of 2 decades of grief and aging. "I miss so much," Emily whispered. "Your whole life, my whole life, all those years just gone." "Not gone," Linda said firmly, taking her daughter's hands. "Stolen. There's a difference. What happened to you was a crime, not a choice. And we have time now. However much time we get, we'll make it count." The adjustment to life outside was brutally difficult. Emily struggled with basic tasks most people took for granted. Grocery stores overwhelmed her with their size and variety. Television was disorienting, the rapid cuts and bright colors triggering anxiety. Even simple conversations exhausted her. After years of silence, the constant flow of words and social cues was like learning a foreign language. She had nightmares every night, waking, gasping, and disoriented, sometimes taking hours to convince herself she wasn't back in the underground chamber. She experienced panic attacks in enclosed spaces. Ironically, the confinement she'd survived now triggered intense claustrophobia. She was 36 years old but had the life experience of a 14-year-old frozen in time, combined with the trauma that had aged her far beyond her years. But there were victories too, small but profound. The first meal Emily ate at a restaurant, just a local diner carefully chosen for its quiet atmosphere, made her cry with the simple joy of choosing her own food, eating in public, participating in normal life. The first time she read a new book, reading had been her salvation underground, but she'd only had limited books. She was amazed by how much the world had changed in literature. The first time she heard music from artists who hadn't existed when she disappeared, she discovered that art had continued, creating beauty even while she was buried in darkness. Detective Martinez visited in early December to officially close the case. He brought Emily's journals, carefully preserved in evidence boxes, and sat with her and Linda in the living room. "The investigation is complete," Martinez said. "James Carter's death means there will be no trial, but the case is solved and documented. Everything we found, the journals, the chamber, the evidence, it all confirms what you've told us. Your statement has been officially recorded. The case of Emily Carter is closed." Emily accepted the boxes of her journals, running her hands over them. 22 years of her life, documented on scraps of paper in an underground tomb. "What happens now? That's up to you," Martinez said gently. "You're free, Emily. Truly free. What you do with that freedom is entirely your choice." After Martinez left, Emily sat holding the journals, thinking about freedom and choices and the impossible task of building a life from the ruins of the one that had been stolen from her. She thought about her father, about the man who had loved her enough to destroy her, about how love twisted by madness becomes its own kind of horror. "Mom," Emily said quietly, "I want to tell my story, not to the media, not to make money, but I want people to understand what happened. I want other people who are trapped, maybe not like I was, but trapped in their own ways, to know that survival is possible, that you can endure the unendurable and still be human on the other side." Linda smiled through tears. "Then we'll tell your story, when you're ready, in your own words, in your own time." On Christmas Eve 2024, Emily Carter stood in her mother's backyard, looking up at stars she hadn't seen in 22 years. The night was cold, snow falling gently, but she stood there anyway, feeling the flakes land on her face, tasting freedom in frozen water falling from the sky. She thought about the girl she had been at 14, innocent, ordinary, with dreams of high school and college and a normal life. That girl was gone, buried as surely as Emily herself had been buried. But in her place was a woman who had survived the impossible, who had maintained her humanity in circumstances designed to destroy it, who had hope even when there was no rational reason for hope. Emily Carter's story was one of horror and trauma, of a father's twisted love and a daughter's stolen decades. But it was also a story of survival, resilience, and the incredible strength of the human spirit. She had been found alive, not unchanged, not undamaged, but alive and fighting for every day of the life that was now hers to live. As snow continued to fall and Christmas lights twinkled in neighboring houses, Emily whispered to the night sky, "I'm here. I survived. And tomorrow, I'll wake up free." Behind her, through the window, Linda watched her daughter stand in the snow, and she wept, for all that had been lost, for all that remained, and for the long, difficult, beautiful road of healing that stretched ahead. The case of the Missouri girl found alive after 22 years buried underground had shocked the nation. But for Emily and Linda Carter, it wasn't a sensational headline. It was their life, their tragedy, their triumph, and their future. built one difficult day at a time from the ashes of the past.